Welcome to the Feeding Our Young podcast. Have you ever heard the phrase, nurses eat their young? Feeding Our Young is more than a podcast. It is a movement. It is a desire to see new nurses of all ages be supported and uplifted by their peers. And it starts with me. It also starts with you. So join our wonderful host, Eric Miller, registered nurse of nearly 20 years, an adjunct clinical faculty instructor, and today's honored guest, me, Samantha Langrick, and be ready to have your life uplifted so that you can, in turn, uplift others. Welcome to the Feeding Our Young podcast.
Hello and good afternoon. I mean, it's at least afternoon where we are right now, when we are right now, here in the middle of October. I don't know if this is going to age well. This will be very fascinating. We have yet to experience Halloween and all the goodies. Fall is just starting, and here we are. You're going to people might hear this even at the start of spring. Who knows? It'll definitely be winter at least. So very confusing for us all. It doesn't help that we're both blondes, both my honored guest and myself. So this will make for a very entertaining episode. That being said, before I have my amazing honored guest introduce herself, just a little bit of a warning, as I've done on occasions past. We're gonna hit some pretty sensitive subjects, and our amazing honored guest is very open about that. And so, if at any point you feel, for lack of a better term, triggered, or if it's bringing up some feelings that maybe you're not ready to deal with, just skip over about the first 20 minutes to a half hour and get to the lighter stuff. This is one of those rare episodes where we're gonna kind of just dive into the heavy stuff first, after our honored guest introduces herself, and then we'll come out and we'll end all on a light note for sure. Because we're not afraid of crying, but we do sure enjoy laughing. So maybe we'll get a little bit of both. Who knows? With that, no more flapping my gums. Would you mind introducing yourself for our lovely audience?
I would love to. My name is Samantha. I am a senior nursing student at Gonzaga. Although by the time this airs, I may have graduated, and that's scary because I will graduate in May of 2025.
Oh, it'll be shortly after your episode airs, but I imagine it'll come out before May. I just can't. To hear you say that even gets me excited for you.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah. So where are you from, Samantha?
I grew up mostly in Salt Lake City, Utah, but I grew up all over the globe. My family lived in Australia 2 different times. So I say I'm from Salt Lake, but half of my childhood was in Australia. So a little bit of home in both places for me.
Oh, that's amazing. We have to ask before we get into the heavy stuff. Military family? Like what, and why Australia twice?
So my dad is a mining engineer, but I get the military family a lot. But him and my mom decided he got an opportunity to go to a small Aboriginal mining community when I was 3 years old, and him and my mom decided they wanted to move the family, and they did it once. They loved it. We moved back to the States. He got another opportunity in Perth, and they decided that's what they wanted to do. So I moved about 4 to 5 times before I even turned 16.
Oh my goodness. That's it's amazing to listen to, not fun to do, that's for sure.
I mean, I think I loved it. Like,
good.
They've asked me if I regret it almost, and
yeah.
You meet so many people, and there's things that I can say I've done that if we had never done those moves, I wouldn't change anything about the whole thing. It was pretty awesome.
That's incredible. Plus, in your back pocket for all those, moments where you need a fun fact, you can say, well, I've been to Australia twice. Or, I've lived in Australia twice. That's actually, I feel like, a step up from I've been to Australia twice. So keeping with those very light-hearted, early standard questions, you chose 3 words to describe nursing school. We'll talk about them at the end, of course, but in the meantime, what were they? Give us a little tease.
The words were empowering, intensive, and revealing.
Ooh, I like all 3 of those, but I usually do, so I suppose we'll just wait and see why you chose those at the end. Also, Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah, I'm gonna keep this in there. So I literally, you're the second honored guest. My first, as you and I were talking about prior to recording, this is our first back-to-back honored guest experience since the summer, and so much fun. The first honored guest had the luxury of me texting them shortly, like within 10 minutes of starting, and I don't think I did the same to you now that I'm thinking about it. There's one more standard early question, and you take all the time to think about it that you want, and we'll cut out that silence.
Yeah.
But there's one more standard early question that I've added that I feel is very revealing and fun. What are 3 of your favorite songs in life right now? And this is a part where all this can go out. Like, you take the time you need. It was like, as I'm talking, I went, oh, I didn't text her this. Oh my gosh.
I almost have to pull up my Spotify and remember.
No, please do. That's what a lot of people do. I'm like, yeah.
This is a terrible.
It's a horrible question.
It's a horrible thing to not have prepared. Okay,
Yep.
Let's see. Let's pull up my running playlist. That's generally where this goes well for me. My 3 favorite songs at the moment. The first one's called The Comeback. I listen to it for every nursing exam. Just for a little confidence boost. It's one of my favorites.
Oh.
My second one is 85 by Andy Grammer. It's a great running song. It's very fast. Makes you go faster.
Come on now.
And then the third one is Fighter by Christina Aguilera.
Oh, those all sound amazing. And maybe I'm being blonde. Did you say who The Comeback was by?
Oh, let me see. That one is by Danny Goki.
I love The Comeback because I feel like that is very applicable to what we're about to talk about. That was a perfect segue into the content warning that I established before. Samantha and I met each other some time ago, and during that time, she was in the cohort during which this crazy idea of starting a podcast came to be. And it was in part because of her cohort and things that they told me and things of that nature. Samantha was one of the ones that was like, oh yeah, let's go. Let's early adopter. Her 30-second promo clip is one of the early ones that we got, one of the very first ones we obtained. And then it came time to do it, and Samantha's like, I'm not in a good space right now. I cannot do it, and I don't think I'll be able to do it all summer, if at all. And I'd love to do it if I can come back to it. And then, out of the blue, here she is. She says, hey, I'm ready to go. So the reasons why that happened, I feel like, Samantha, to sum it up, not eloquently either, is that you've lived a lifetime over the course of this last summer. Because it sure, after reading what you had sent me, feels like it on my end. And it's something that we are not strangers to in our family ourselves. So with that, I'm going to try and do my best to shut my yapper and let you tell your story, because I feel like it's going to benefit so many people.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just start kind of where school ended last May. And things ended, and I knew I was staying in Spokane. I work as a nurse tech here, so I knew I was staying. And I knew a lot of my friends, almost all my friends, that I had established at college were leaving, including my long-term boyfriend was going back to Seattle to work his summer job. And I knew I had a little bit of anxiety about that having to be alone for almost 4 months, living in a house where you've previously had roommates and you have this amazing social system. So all of a sudden you're going to work a whole lot of hours and not have anything at home. It was just a really daunting thought. So I spent most of May at home. I actually went home for about a month just to spend time with my family.
Good.
And had a blast. Had an absolutely wonderful time with them. Got back to Spokane, and sure enough, I was just a little bit of a nervous wreck. It was difficult transitioning to a new floor. I worked on peds oncology over the summer. I ended up loving it. But it's hard when you start a new group of people and a new routine, and you never really know what's expected of you. So there was the stress of that, the stress of living on my own. I'd done it before, but it's always a little bit harder when you're in a longer term relationship. My relationship was one of the things I really struggled with, was doing long distance. And so it was a very large adjustment. And around the start of June, I was going to work, and all of a sudden I wasn't sleeping, like at all. I was just waking up in the middle of the night. I wasn't feeling good. before I go to work, I got super nauseous, and it spiraled from there. It went from kind of feeling isolated to all of a sudden having panic attacks pretty
Oh no.
frequently. Um, and I can remember the first panic attack I had. It was at work, and I was setting up a patient room just for an admit, pretty routine. I knew what went in the room. All of a sudden, I can remember I'm trying to write their name on the board, and my hands just like uncontrollably shaking.
Oh. Oh.
And I was like, okay, I had one cup of coffee. Like, this is ridiculous. So I just tried to ignore it, ignore it, ignore it. And it turns out with a panic attack, that doesn't work. So I ended up like hyperventilating, and all of a sudden I was like, I'm going to throw up and I'm going to cry. Like, this is just right now, the world is ending. Things are closing in and I cannot breathe.
Yeah.
And so I hid in the bathroom for about 20 minutes and just sat on the floor because the world was spinning and I could not breathe was the biggest thing. Is I felt like there was this pressure in my chest that I just could not get air into my lungs. And that was terrifying. That was one of the scariest things I would say in my life that I've experienced. It was a moment of pure fear. And they kept happening. And I didn't tell anyone about it because I didn't know how to talk about it. So I was now having them every day. And that causes anxiety all on its own because you feel like something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I was convinced that something was very wrong with me, that there was a medical problem, something was very, very wrong, but I didn't know how to tell people. I didn't know how to talk about any of it. And thankfully, even though we were long distance, I have a partner who is very attentive and knows me well enough to know that even though I didn't want to admit I wasn't okay, he could tell very clearly. Could tell. And I think I hid it for about 2 weeks that something was really going on before he picked up on it. And I can remember the day he did pick up on it. I think I had the day off and it rained in Spokane. And I was so anxious and I felt like my room, the walls were I could just feel everything getting smaller again. I was like, I need fresh air. I need to go outside. And I walked out, totally forgetting it was raining, like didn't have a jacket on or anything. And I just walked in the rain, freezing cold, in the rain. And I was texting him while doing it, and he's like, I can literally see that it's raining on the forecast. Like, you need to go home. This is not a good idea. But I was hysterical. Like, I was jumping in puddles. Like, it was the weirdest thing because I went from, like, about to have a panic attack to hysterical. Like, it was almost a manic episode. It was really, really disorienting at the time.
I bet.
But it was that day will stick in my head forever because there were thoughts I had that day that I never thought I would have. That was the day where everything had culminated to a point. It was about the end of June by this point that I was so done fighting. I didn't want to anymore. I didn't want to have a panic attack. I didn't want to go into work and dread working. I thought for a period of time, I was like, oh my God, what if I hate nursing? Like, I've now dedicated years of my life to this goal. Yeah. This is what I've worked for. And I'm having panic attacks before I go to work and at work. What if I hate nursing? Like, I don't have a plan B. There was never another option in my head. So that was equally as terrifying to go, oh my gosh, what if I hate nursing? What if I hate pediatrics? The thing I thought I wanted to do from the start. And that's the cause of all of this. So it was a very, very frightening period of time. And unfortunately, that day when I was walking in the rain, I can remember standing on the bridge by Gonzaga and just wondering what would happen if I jumped off. And that's not something I admitted to myself until probably August that thought was there because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I was having an intrusive thought to which I would want to do something like that. And I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't even know how to admit it to myself. And that I'm proud to say that now I can talk about it, but for a long time I couldn't.
Yeah.
And so that day was really monumental for me because it was the day I think my boyfriend went, oh crap, like
Hmm. Yeah.
intervention is needed now and we need to talk. And that was the day that I would say things were at their worst.
Mm.
Um, and that was a really impactful moment. And kind of the turning point too, in a sense. It didn't get better for a while, but my boyfriend actually, after that, texted. We had talked for a long time. We had done hours of phone calls in which I had had a panic attack and like about thrown up, or one night I made my nose bleed. Like
Mm.
it was just the random things that like he had started to see and the discussions that we had had. And it finally came to a point one night without me knowing. He texted my mom and was like, we have a problem and I can't help her. He was like,
Yeah.
I'm ready for her to come live with me in Seattle, or she needs to go home to you because
Yeah.
this isn't, she's a bit, I read the text later, so I know what it says.
Yeah.
It's pretty much, she's in a really bad spot. I don't know how much she's told you, but I'm seeing signs of depression and she's not okay.
Hmm.
Um, and so the next morning I got a call from my mom and she pretty much went, what the heck? Like, what's going on? You have to talk to me. And so I kind of told her, but I don't think I necessarily told her everything.
Right.
Like, I hadn't, she's my mom. I didn't want her to freak out. My mom also doesn't get anxiety. Like,
Mm.
I admire her deeply because she just doesn't worry about things.
Yeah.
She just does her thing. And she is bold and she is fierce and she is passionate and doesn't care about what other people think or what's gonna, like, she is a strong, independent woman and is the definition of it. I am not like that. And so it was, her response was kind of suck it up and get through it,
Oh.
which ended in me hanging up on her.
Mm.
And we've later worked it out that she has come to understand a lot more of what I had to go through. But she had my dad call me because my dad does deal with anxiety and very severe
Ah.
anxiety
Uh-huh.
uh, that we saw a lot when we moved, actually. Every time we moved, my dad had a lot more anxiety and his work causes him anxiety. So he was able to kind of, we spent probably 2.5 hours on the phone where he walked me through a lot and we worked through maybe some of the causes of it. And for first, he's like, you're lonely and you're anxious about the fact that you're alone. And I have no doubt that's how it started. That I was anxious about being alone. I was anxious about a new job. I was anxious about starting senior year. School had ended, so now I had nothing to do with my free time. So in my free time, I just worried. And
Yeah.
that was what happened. And so once we kind of got to the bottom of that, he helped me work through like maybe some coping strategies we can go through. And he asked, he's like, what do you need right now? And I was like, I want a hug. I want a hug. And I can remember just saying it in the most vulnerable, like I was crying. I'd been
Mm.
crying for
Mm.
2 hours. And I can just remember saying, I just need a hug. And
Yeah.
he's like, I'm calling your uncle who lives in Spokane. Go get a hug. And sure
Mhm.
enough, not 10 minutes later, he called me back and he's like, they're expecting you in half an hour. Like,
Mm.
I didn't say much. They just know that you're coming up. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And sure enough, I showed up and my aunt gave me a hug. My uncle gave me a hug. And I was able to just be around people, which at that time was so, it kind of recentered me a little bit and made me go, okay, there's more than what I'm going through. There's still good. Like, there's
Yeah.
still good things that I can look forward to. And that was an intervention at the time that I think saved me from going down the very, very dark path that I had started down.
Yeah.
But after that, it didn't end. I kind of thought like, okay, so we've worked out, I'm lonely. Like, I'll meet up with a couple, I'll make new friends. Like, I've got a couple people I don't really know that are in Spokane. Like, I'll reach out. I'll go see my boyfriend this weekend. Like, let's just solve, like, it's okay that I'm lonely. That's fine. But like, let's try and do things. Let's go for hikes. Like, let's try and get out of this funk. And none of that worked. Like, I was anxious for no good reason. Just
Mm.
every day, anxious feeling that the world was going to end. I couldn't breathe. Like, I just remember like taking a deep breath and it feeling like your lungs aren't getting big enough,
Yeah.
which physiologically doesn't make any sense. But it's in my head that like, no, I'm actually like, they're not getting bigger. Like my rib cage is too small. Um, and jitters and nausea and just all the awful symptoms of anxiety
Mhm.
and continuing to have these panic attacks. And so finally my boyfriend and I had kind of talked and I was like, okay, I need to go back into therapy because at the start of the semester when I had you as an instructor, I had been in therapy because I had gotten
Yeah.
really anxious about school because that's kind of the first semester that things go from like, yay, I'm in nursing school to, oh crap, like this is
I'm in
me.
nursing school.
Like, oh crap, like
Yeah.
this is a lot more work than geriatric clinical. Like, it's real here. Uh, and so I had been in therapy and like worked through how to deal with stress in school. And so I reached out again and ended up back in therapy. And this time it was a lot more serious. And like we weren't just working through school stuff, like we were working through a lot of why I have anxiety and what we were going to do about it. And after weeks of doing that, like once a week sessions, I still had these, like, my thoughts were getting better, but the physiological feeling of anxiety wasn't going away. And I was so frustrated because it's like, I don't understand what's wrong with me. Like,
Yeah.
my head is no longer having those intrusive thoughts. Like, we're past that. But this is debilitating. Like, I
Yeah.
can't sleep. I'm taking melatonin every night, which is not something I love doing. But
Mhm.
I I was giving myself more migraines. I was like, this is not healthy. Like, I need a different solution. And at the time, I was very opposed to going on a medication. I had this idea that if I went on a medication, I had failed. In my head, I had seen people deal with anxiety, and they can solve it. You
Mhm.
can just address your thoughts, address your pattern. I mean, they say, thoughts affect feelings, which affect behaviors. Well, if you can fix your thoughts, hypothetically, you should be able to change everything else. And I
Right.
saw medication as a failure. And it took a lot of my boyfriend going, no, no, that is not what this means. Like,
Yeah.
this is not, no, incorrect. But it was actually a conversation with my dad. I called him and was like, I think I need to do this. I think I need help. And I had actually set up a meeting with my primary care provider back home on telehealth
Mhm.
before telling my dad this because I wanted to know what her honest assessment was of when she talked to me, what she thought. And she pretty much came out and told me, yep, you have generalized anxiety and panic disorder. There you go.
There it is.
I
Here you are.
want an SSRI. And I was like, okay, so now we're at the point where I've got a medical professional telling me I probably need to go on this.
Hmm.
And I knew it wouldn't be short term. This isn't something you just take and it gets better. So she gave me a beta blocker for panic attacks for when they happen. And she gave me a Lexapro. And I talked to my dad and was like, I don't know that I can do this. I don't know that I can admit failure and give up and just take a drug because I don't think drugs are the answer to everything. And fundamentally, I'm solving it with a drug instead
Yeah.
of addressing my problems. And my dad was like, no, like wrong, incorrect.
Mhm.
This is you taking taking control and saying, you know what? I have anxiety and I'm going to choose every day to live with it and to fight with it, like to fight it, to
Yeah.
go through life with it. You have done all the steps and the condition was I had to stay in therapy and see that through. So I
Mhm.
did. And I had to learn how to deal with the thoughts because those medications take 6 weeks to kick in. It's not
Yeah.
fast. And they have side effects that you
Mhm.
experience. I was nauseous for about 3 weeks, which was
Oh.
super fun.
Yeah.
Um, and so my dad kind of looked at me and he's like, if you're going to do this, you need to commit to it and you need to believe that it's going to work. You need to
Mm.
believe that you can do this and that if this is accepting help and it's going to make that mountain a hill, you can still claim responsibility. This is you claiming responsibility for what you're going through. And that was powerful for him to go, you have to commit to it and you have to believe in it.
Yeah.
Because we can tell you, the doctor can tell you, your boyfriend can tell you, you can do it. But if you don't believe that you are capable of overcoming this and that you are going to do it, it's not going to matter. And you will continue to have anxiety and you will continue to have panic attacks. But you have to commit to it. And that really stuck with me. That there's an element of anxiety that I like the phrase willfully tolerate. You have to be willful. You have to want to put up with it. You can't make it go away. We can't make anxiety go away. I'm in the hardest semester of Gonzaga's nursing school, and I still get anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Like, should have seen me before the midterm. Not as bad, but not like very anxious period of time. You're never going to make life stress and anxiety go away. But you can willfully put up with the anxiety and you can choose to continue to live and work through it. And that frame of mind, that shift that happened was monumental. It took weeks, but that was one of the things I needed to do to overcome that challenge, was to work through this, not submitting to it and not admitting a failure, and kind of not just giving up on myself and choosing that even though it's hard, I can do it. And that was huge for me. And then when the anxiety medication kicked in, it did take care of those physical symptoms. I now sleep better at night. I feel like I can breathe. My running pace is improved all of a sudden. Like, things got so much better physiologically, and therefore they got better mentally too. Like, the first day that I didn't think about the fact that I was anxious was weird, because for 3 months, all I could think about was I was anxious. And if you ask me what I did this summer, I can tell you major highlights, but I actually don't remember going to work every day. Like, I don't remember it's just a blur. I just remember being anxious all the time.
Yeah.
That's all there was. And now it's a totally different story. I still have anxiety and I still have to work through it, but I have not had a panic attack since this summer. But even if I were to have a panic attack, it would be okay. It's not the end of the world. And I'm not afraid of that anymore. Anxiety is there, and I willfully tolerate it, and I work through it because that's a part of life. But I 100% think that the medication was the correct option for me.
Yeah.
And I will stay on that. The doctor's not letting me come off of it until spring, because she doesn't let people come off of it in the winter for
obvious.
An antidepressant, and you don't want to come off of that in the time of day where we have like 8 hours of sun.
Exactly.
So, I'm going to be on it for a while. And honestly, it'll probably be after nursing school doesn't get better, then you're a new grad and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. So if, again, it makes that mountain that I was having to climb into a little bit of a hill, I'll take it. I can climb the hill, but a mountain was too much. And that's the analogy I use for people when I'm like, yeah, it does work. It significantly helped me. And my boyfriend will be the first to tell you that I'm a totally different person than I was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And that this is the person that I am. And over the summer, it was a large battle of losing myself completely, to the point where I was ready, looking at a bridge going, what happens if I jump?
Yeah.
So now I'm back on my feet and doing really well. So that's the journey of why I couldn't necessarily talk about things over the summer, because I was in the thick of it and didn't know how to talk about nursing school and what was going on.
Yeah, far from that.
So I was such a mess for about 4 months. So it was a long process, but I'm very grateful that I had my boyfriend and my dad especially to help me navigate that.
Oh, my dad heart. I just hugs to you, friend. I just can't. Oh my gosh. Thank you for opening that up and being willing to share that, because you're not the only one who's been there. You're not the only one who's going to be there. And I genuinely believe that someone hearing this is gonna either they're going to recognize it when it happens, or it's already happening, or they'll know someone where they go, oh my gosh, like I need to reach out. Your experience this summer is essentially what we in the nursing field, you know what I mean? We talk about empowering our patients, right? And you've just modeled that completely. You are now here on the other side of that. And I dare say better for it. Obviously, do I wish you went through it? No, you know what I mean? It's like, especially the dad in me, I'll take that away. I tell my kids the same thing. I wish I could take that away from you. But because I can't, because that's not an option, now the option is, you know what I mean? Does it cut your career short? Does it cut your life short? Or do you come out the other side of that?
You come out stronger. You 100% do. And it's not a moment in my lifetime I'm necessarily proud of, but I am proud of the fact I came through it on the other side. And that's what I remind myself is when it gets hard, I have overcome all of my worst days.
Yeah.
And I've had some pretty bad worst days.
Yeah.
So those moments make you stronger.
Yeah.
And as cliche as it is, that's sometimes on the worst days, that's what I remember is you have overcome all of the crap life has thrown at you so far.
And that's good of you to be able to remember that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say, I love that your dad added that, and you have to believe it. It's one thing to be committed to it, whatever that it is, but to believe that it'll help and to believe that that's a difficult, that's sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like sometimes that's the most difficult leap to make, right?
It's the most difficult in everything. I mean, going into a test, if you don't believe you're going to do well, I guarantee you it's not going to go well for you. Like, you have to believe in everything you do that you are capable of doing it. Running has taught me this. You can go out and say, I'm going to go run Bloomsday. But if you don't believe that you're capable of doing it, I've done Bloomsday with no training. Like, you can totally go run 7.5 miles and there's some big hills in there and you can just pull it off. But if you don't believe you can do it, you're not going to finish. And running has definitely taught me that. Nursing school has taught me that when I walk into an exam, I go in there with my head held high, knowing I have done everything I possibly can. There's nothing more I could have done. And I'm perfectly capable of doing this. I'm perfectly capable of answering whatever they throw at me. And sometimes it's wild. So if you don't have that belief in yourself, you're setting yourself up to not do well. And that was a huge lesson coming out of this summer for me, was you have to believe you're capable of doing it.
Yeah. There's a lot of I've heard a lot of different variations on the theme, just as far as like, well, you know, you talk about that positive manifestations and you need to, you know what I mean? Like, you need to speak these things into existence. And there's an element of that. But even if you look at it strictly from a logical side, as opposed to the heart or the soul, but you look at it even from a logical side, yeah, that'll help. Like, if you are genuinely saying that and you reach a point where you believe it, because conversely, the opposite is true. You know, those that are told over and over, either by themselves or by loved ones or by whatever, that they can't make it and they're not good enough. And, you know, eventually that thought becomes a belief. And when it becomes a belief, it becomes powerful one way or the other. Oh, Samantha, we got nothing else to talk about. That's it. This is your episode's done. Like, holy cow. Let's do this. We're pivoting at the last minute here, looking at the clock. So every once in a while, somebody's got enough to say that it's obvious they're going to be a double episode. You are looking like that to me. So that being said, we're kind of pivoting here at the last minute. If it's all right with you, I know that you have one more kind of sensitive subject to talk about, a little less sensitive than what we've done. Just for those that are listening or have gotten to this point are like, oh my gosh, they're still going. Okay. No, it's a little less sensitive, but there's some stuff in there. So how about we chat about that and jump into the rest? We'll keep all the lighthearted stuff, the nursing stuff, into the second episode. Sound good? Okay, so let's just, why don't you just jump, you've already started talking about your family, so tell us more about your family and the things that you want to share about that.
So I will start. We've met my mom and dad. My mother is a wonderful human being. She's overcome a lot in her life too, and she has taught me that there is strength in knowing who you are and just being bold and confident with it. And she's a wonderful person. My dad is driven and wonderful as well and has supported me in all my endeavors. Love him to death. And then I have a 16-year-old brother who is also a wonderful human being, but he's also a 16-year-old boy. Uh, and there's days that sometimes I get a call from my mom and she's like, I'm shipping your brother to you. And I'm like, so yeah, let's just say I'm glad I don't live at home anymore. 16, not, no, if I have like, in the far future when I have kids, 16 is not an age I look forward to.
No.
But he is a wonderful human being as well, and our relationship is something I cherish very deeply. Because he's a wonderful human being, but also because he's the only sibling I have left. I lost a brother when I was 4. Jacob was 2. And I do remember some things, but I was 4. You don't remember a whole lot. But that losing Jacob, but also having him, it is part of who I am. And it is a large part of who I am and why I went into nursing and why I believe that nursing is a beautiful, beautiful career and a choice. Jacob was born with epilepsy, but we didn't know that necessarily at the time. He was just having seizures. He was also globally developmentally delayed, so he could not walk by the time he was 2. And he couldn't roll over on his own either. So we think the reason he passed was he threw up in his sleep and couldn't roll over. So it wasn't even like there was nothing that could have been done to prevent that. But obviously for several reasons, that was a traumatic experience in my childhood. I do believe that part of the reason I'm so independent is because I was 4, and when my parents lost a child, I lost them for a little bit too. And so my mom will tell you I was the best child at playing alone. I was just super good at it. I knew how to entertain myself and I knew how to keep myself occupied. And that has carried over. I'm independent. I don't really like asking for help. Not really a thing I do well. And I think that's why. I also think that, the reason that kind of developed too is when you're 4, you don't understand death. It's not a concept that you really understand. So as I got older, I had to understand what losing a brother really meant, and what you lose there. You lose a friend, you lose the middle child that sits in between you and your other sibling and breaks up all the fights. Or, Tyler lost the opportunity to have a brother even though he wasn't born yet. So there's some of that too, that like as I got older, I had to learn what that loss meant for me because my parents had dealt with it by the time I had kind of wrapped my head around it. So that's definitely part of the independence piece. But beyond that, what Jacob taught my family, and all 4 of us will tell you this, that Jacob taught us how to love unconditionally. And that is something that those 2 words, unconditional love, if I hadn't already have been talking, I think those might have been my first words, because it's just preached in my family from my parents that when Jacob met someone, it didn't matter who they were, he smiled and he laughed and he was happy. In every picture I have of him, he is laughing and smiling. And I have a beautiful memory that I know is mine because I've asked my mom and she knows nothing about this. She's like, I didn't tell you about it.
Like, this did not, I have no idea.
Like, this one I can choose is mine. It's just the 2 of us sitting on the ground in Australia, actually, playing with pool balls and just laughing with one another. Because, we're 4 and 2.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You entertain yourself with anything. And so, like, not throwing literally, but like rolling them back and forth to one another. And we're just laughing. And that's so beautiful to me because it just it pictures this perfectly, that no matter who you are, we're going to show you love. Despite the fact that Jacob couldn't talk, he couldn't communicate very well, even though he was 2. And, he had these seizures, and he needed so much extra help. We had bars that he had to hold because he couldn't pull himself up by himself.
Yeah.
So even though he needed all of this, not only did Jacob show us unconditional love, but we showed it for him. And I see that through my parents, that they gave everything to Jacob because of who he was, not despite it, but they loved him for who he was.
Yes.
And that is something for me that drew me to nursing. It absolutely inspired me as I got older, that if I can't love that way every single day and I can't give that to other people, then I don't know what I'm going to do, because that's who I am, is to have that open heart and really be there for people.
So your experience with Jacob, I imagine, informed and your family and all these amazing qualities that you're talking about, I imagine informed who you are and maybe the direction that you've gone in life in becoming a nurse. You've already established there was no option B, no plan B. You wanted to be a nurse. So if it's all right with you, why don't we put a pin in it there, and we'll pick this discussion up in the second episode, so that those who maybe have skipped this first part based on the difficult stuff that we're talking about can hear this part of the story, if that's okay. Does that sound like a good plan, Samantha?
Absolutely.
All right. I'll see you on the flip side then. Here's what's happening on the next episode of Feeding Our Young.
Like, you see, I feel like in so many other majors, there's so much competition, and there is competition in nursing school, but I feel like it comes to a point where we understand that, like, ultimately at the end of the day, it's not going to matter, because we're dealing with things that are so much worse than a business major has to deal with. Nothing against business majors.
No,
but
not at all.
It's a very different seriousness, and that seriousness brings this, kind of puts the competition aside, where you're like, you know what? We're going to support each other. We're going to do it, and we're going to get through it together. And as nurses, we're a team. Yeah. When you press the staff assist button, I have never seen 20 people move that fast. Yeah. Like, it is beautiful how much nurses stick together.
Did you like today's episode of Feeding Our Young? Let today's honored guest know by emailing us at thanks@feedingouryoung.org. Also, if you are a nursing student, nurse, or a nursing instructor and would like to be featured on a future episode, please email us a few details about yourself at the very special email address mystory@feedingouryoung.org. If you have a question you would like addressed in a future Q&A episode, please send it to q@feedingouryoung.org. For all other inquiries, please email us at info@feedingouryoung.org or text us at area code 509-ALL-THEM, 509-255-8436. We're so excited to have you return to hear our next honored guest. Be sure to follow us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Feeding Our Young LLC. Again, that's username Feeding Our Young LLC. Until next time, be encouraged and go find someone to encourage today.